I should have listened to the warnings. People said no one should step inside that morgue. They called it cursed, abandoned for a reason. But we were too stubborn, too eager, too convinced that it was just another old building with a few ghost stories attached to it. At first, everything was silent. Just the sound of our own footsteps crunching against the gravel, our breath fogging up in the cold air. The entrance loomed ahead, a rusted door swaying slightly as if inviting us in. Maybe it was the wind, maybe something else. But here's where things started to feel wrong. As we stood there, debating whether to go inside, we heard it, faint, almost silent. A slow, shallow exhale like someone struggling to breathe. The kind of sound you'd hear from a patient clinging to their last moments. We turned to each other, eyes wide, searching for an explanation. Maybe it was just the wind filtering through the broken windows. Maybe it was a trick of the mind. But then, it happened again. Longer this time. Wheezing, ragged, labored. It wasn't coming from behind us. It wasn't coming from the street. It was coming from inside the morgue. A warning would have been wise. A second thought, even wiser. But instead, someone reached for the door handle, fingers trembling, and pushed it open. And the moment we stepped inside, we realized we were not alone. If you listen closely, even now, you might hear them breathing. We were parked a few blocks away, engine running, headlights off. No one spoke. No one laughed. The excitement we had felt earlier, the thrill of the challenge, had settled into something heavier, something unspoken. So, we're really doing this? Someone finally asked. No one answered right away. Maybe because deep down, none of us wanted to be the first to admit that this didn't feel like the others. We had broken into abandoned hospitals, forgotten mansions, places that carried whispers of the past. But this morgue, this was different. The air around it felt stagnant, like the whole area had been untouched for far too long. One of us had pulled up an old news article, the glow from the phone's screen, the only light inside the car. The headline was enough to make us pause. Abandoned morgue shut down after disturbing incident. Disturbing incident, I repeated, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. No details, the person holding the phone muttered. Just, it was shut down in the 90s. No records, no police reports, like someone made sure it was wiped clean. That doesn't mean anything, someone else chimed in, forcing a nervous chuckle. People love making up stories about abandoned places. But no one laughed. A new silence settled in, thick and unmoving. Then, finally, someone spoke again. We go in, we film, we get out. That's it. 1 hour, tops. And if something goes wrong? The question hung in the air, heavier than it should have been. It won't, someone answered too quickly. A deep breath, a nod. And just like that, we grabbed our cameras, pulled our hoods up, and stepped out into the cold night. Getting inside was easier than it should have been. The back entrance was padlocked, rusted over with time. But the main door? It was already open. Not fully, just slightly. A sliver of darkness where the light from our flashlights couldn't reach. It shouldn't have been possible. Places like this are usually boarded up, sealed shut by the city, made impossible to enter. But this door had been left waiting. Guys, I don't think we should do this. The voice came from behind me, hesitating. It was Eric's voice. I don't know if it was fear or something else, but for a moment I almost agreed. Almost. We've come this far, someone else said, stepping forward. We can't back out now. Another breath, another moment of hesitation. And then, before any of us could change our minds, we stepped inside. It was colder than it should have been. Not just because of the night, but because of something else, something deeper. The air was heavy, stagnant, thick with the scent of something that had been left to rot. The walls were peeling, the tile floors cracked and discolored, but none of that was what made us stop. It was the silence. The kind of silence that made you feel like you were being watched, like something was waiting for you to notice it. We took cautious steps forward, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. Every sound seemed amplified. The scuff of a shoe, the creak of old floorboards, the quiet click of a camera being turned on. And then, a noise. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Metal against metal. A slow, dragging sound from somewhere deeper inside. What was that? Probably just something falling over, someone whispered, but their voice didn't sound convinced. We stood there, frozen, listening. Nothing, just the silence settling back in, wrapping around us like a second skin. "Keep moving," someone said. "We'll check it out later." We didn't know it then, but there wouldn't be a later. Because the moment we took our next step, a loud metallic clank echoed from the darkness ahead. Deep, resounding, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. This time, we all heard it. This time, none of us could pretend it was just the wind. The deeper we went, the worse it felt. The air inside the morgue was thick, unmoving. The kind of stale that clung to the back of your throat, like the place had been sealed off from the world for too long. Dust hung in the air, disturbed only by the slow sweep of our flashlights. But it wasn't just the air. It was the feeling, like we were being watched. The hallway stretched ahead, long and dark, the tile floors littered with broken glass and debris. Our footsteps echoed too loudly. Each step felt like it was announcing our presence to something lurking just beyond the edge of the light. "Stay close," someone whispered. No one argued. We moved in a tight formation, cameras rolling, flashlights sweeping the walls. Old medical charts were scattered across the floor, damp and yellowed with time. Faint smears of something dark stained the walls. Maybe water damage, maybe something else. Then I heard it. A breath, wet, raspy, just behind me. I spun around, flashlight shaking, heart slamming against my ribs. Nothing, just empty space. Just the hallway stretching back the way we came. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Hear what?" "Breathing, right behind me." A pause. No one spoke. Then, from the other end of the hallway, a sound. Faint, but unmistakable. A footstep. "Who's there?" Someone called out, voice steady but forced. No answer. Star. We swept our lights toward the far end of the hallway. The shadows seemed deeper there, like the darkness had weight, pressing in around the corners of the room. Then, movement. A figure. Just for a second. A silhouette slipping behind a doorway before our lights could catch it. "Did you see that?" "Someone's here." "No one's supposed to be here," someone whispered, gripping their camera tighter. Then what the hell did we just see? No one had an answer. We kept moving, slower now. Every few steps, we'd stop and listen, trying to pick up any sound that didn't belong. The silence was pressing in harder, thicker, like the walls were closing in on us. Then, we reached the first body storage room. Rows of metal drawers lined the walls. Some were still sealed shut, the small metal plaques rusted over, names long since faded. But one was slightly open. Just enough to see the darkness inside. Just enough to see that something had disturbed it. That wasn't open before, was it? I don't know. We should keep moving. Someone stepped closer, reaching out, fingers hesitating over the edge of the metal slab, as if expecting something to grab back. For a moment, it felt like time stretched thin, the air itself waiting for a reaction. But nothing happened. "Just old metal shifting," someone muttered, stepping away. "It's nothing." We wanted to believe that. We left the body storage room behind and turned down another hallway. The lights from our flashlights flickered, the batteries struggling against the cold. Ahead, An autopsy table sat abandoned in the center of the room, straps still dangling from its sides. That's when someone whispered, "Guys, that gurney just moved." The camera zoomed in, shaky, catching the faintest shift in the old metal frame. A flicker, a tiny, almost an unnoticeable movement. We didn't breathe, we didn't move, we just stared. And then it moved again, this time a bit slower than the first. We managed to convince ourselves that we were alone, that whatever we had seen, the flicker of movement, the distant footsteps, had an explanation, a draft, a trick of the light, a shifting foundation. But then we saw the handprint. "Guys, look at this!" The words came out unsteady, barely above a whisper. Someone was pointing at the autopsy table in the center of the room, the one with the rusted restraints still dangling from its sides. At first, we didn't see it. Not until the flashlight beam passed over it at just the right angle. A handprint, smeared against the metal surface, streaked across it like something had been dragged. The shape was unmistakable. Fingers, a palm. But the thing that made my stomach turn, the thing that made my skin prickle, it was fresh. This wasn't here before. "Maybe it's old," someone muttered. "Look at it, it's still wet." A pause. No one spoke, no one breathed. Then, that means someone else is here. The cold storage lockers lined the walls, each with its own metal handle and faded label. Most were sealed shut, rusted over with time. But one was open just enough to see the darkness inside. Just enough to tell that something had disturbed it. We didn't want to check. Every part of me screamed to turn back, to leave before we saw something we weren't meant to. But then, a whisper, software weak, coming from somewhere in the room. "Help! Me!" The whisper sent a shock through us, freezing us where we stood. It hadn't come from any of us. That much was clear. It had come from ahead, from the cold storage lockers. But when we turned our lights toward the source, nothing. "Did you hear that?" someone asked, voice barely steady. "It came from the lockers." No, it didn't. It was closer. We stood there, flashlights trembling, listening, waiting. The silence stretched on, thick and suffocating, wrapping itself around us like a second skin. Then, a sound behind us, a soft, dragging shift, almost imperceptible. But there, we spun around, cameras catching the moment just before the screen cut to static. None of us saw it then, but the footage would later show. A body bag, just behind us, moving. We told ourselves we were imagining things. That the whisper had been the wind through the vents. That the handprint had been left by someone years ago. That the shifting body bag had been nothing more than settling fabric. But then it happened again. That thing just moved, right? The words were barely out before another sound echoed through the room. A low, hollow creak, like metal straining against weight. Our flashlights darted across the morgue, beams shaking as we tried to pinpoint the source. Then, another shift. One of the body bags on the slab nearest to us deflated slightly, like something inside had just exhaled. No one spoke. No one dared to. "Tell me you saw that," one of us finally whispered. "We need to leave," another voice insisted, sharp, urgent. "Not yet," someone else argued, voice low, steady, like they were forcing themselves to sound calm. "We came here for proof." "We already have proof. Let's just go." No. The night vision camera was rolling now, its grainy screen casting an eerie green glow over the room. The autopsy tables, the cold storage lockers, the scattered debris, it all looked distorted, unreal. Like we weren't even standing in reality anymore. Then, the camera glitched. For a split second, the footage distorted. Static flickering across the screen, the image twisting and warping. And in that instant, something else appeared. A figure, standing near the cold storage lockers. Still, motionless, watching, Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone. Did you see that? See what? The camera? There was someone standing over there. No one's over there. It was on the screen. I swear to God, I just saw... Then, bang! A door slammed shut behind us, the sound so violent it sent a shudder through the walls. The air pressure changed instantly, like something had just sealed us in. We spun toward the exit, the door now locked tight, unmoving. We're trapped. This isn't right. This isn't supposed to happen. We have to get out of here, now! We turned back toward the room. The body bags were still. The cold storage lockers were silent. But the air had changed, thick with something unseen. Something waiting. And then, a slow, deliberate knock came from inside one of the metal drawers. Panic was setting in. The door was locked. The air felt heavier. The silence wasn't just silence anymore. It was expectant, watching, waiting. And then we saw the walls. At first, we thought it was just damage. Years of neglect leaving deep, uneven grooves in the walls, jagged lines running from ceiling to floor. But as the flashlight beams traced over them, illuminating the patterns, we saw the truth. Those aren't random, someone whispered. The scratches weren't chaotic. They were deliberate. Letters, words, names. Oh my God. The realization was slow, sinking in piece by piece like a creeping infection. Some of the names were faint, barely visible beneath the dust and decay. Others were deep, too deep, like whoever had carved them had done so with desperate, bleeding fingers. "These are names," I muttered. "Names of people." "Not just people," someone else added, voice tight. "People who went missing." A pause. The weight of that truth settled over us like a lead blanket. "They never left." A sudden noise, a scrape, like something shifting against the floor, made us whirl around. Our cameras panned across the room, catching glimpses of the decayed space. The shattered glass of an old surgical lamp, the overturned gurney, the deep shadows stretching in the corners. And then, the mirror. It was cracked, splintered down the center, but through the webbed fractures, something looked back at us. A face, not one of ours. Who is that? What the hell is happening? I raised my flashlight, angling it toward the mirror, but the second the beam touched the glass, the face was gone. Only our own reflections remained, distorted by the cracks. But none of us spoke. None of us could, because we all knew we had seen it. And then, breathing. Not ours. It was slow, deliberate, coming from somewhere near the cold storage lockers. I turned my camera toward the body on the nearest table, encased in a stained white sheet. It was still. Completely still. Then, beneath the fabric, a rise. A slow, shallow breath. "No," someone choked. "No, that's not possible." But the sheet moved again, lifting, expanding, as if lungs beneath it had begun to wake up. A hand twitched beneath the sheet. Then, in one slow, unnatural motion, the corpse sat up. It didn't flinch, didn't jerk, it just rose. And in that moment, every instinct in my body screamed to run. We had to move. Now, the thing on the table, the thing that should have been dead. It sat there, breath rattling beneath the sheet, chest rising and falling in shallow, unnatural motions. It wasn't looking at us, but we knew. It knew we were here. And we knew we weren't supposed to be. Go! The first person to break was Mark. He bolted toward the hallway, camera swinging wildly as he ran. The rest of us followed, adrenaline pushing us forward, our footsteps slamming against the cold tile floor. The only sound louder than our footsteps was the pounding in my skull. We needed to get to the exit. "This way! Keep moving!" The hallway stretched ahead, impossibly long. Too long. It felt like we were running in place, like something was stretching the space around us. No matter how fast we moved, the exit door at the end of the hall didn't seem to get any closer. And then, just as we thought we were gaining ground, It appeared. A shrouded figure stood at the far end of the corridor, completely still, watching. "What the hell is that? Don't stop! We made a mistake coming here." The figure didn't move, didn't flinch. But the moment my camera landed on it, the screen distorted, static crawling across the lens, warping the image. And then, all at once, the figure was moving. Not walking, not running, just shifting. 1 second, it was at the end of the hall. The next, it was closer. Too close. We turned, sprinted. The door was there, right in front of us now. Our hands slammed against it, pulling, pushing, jammed. "Open it. I'm trying. They don't want us to leave." Then, a whisper, right behind us, right at our backs. "Stay," the voice said slowly. The door unlocked on its own. The handle turned, the old hinges groaning as if something on the other side had finally allowed us to leave. We didn't question it. We didn't look back. We shoved through the doorway, out into the night, gasping for breath. But when we turned to count our team, one of us was missing. We had made it out. Or at least, we thought we had. The cold night air burned in my lungs as we staggered away from that place. My legs ached from running. My hands were still shaking. None of us spoke, because none of us could. The relief of escaping was poisoned by something worse, something unspoken, something gnawing at our thoughts. We had left someone behind, and we hadn't even realized it. "Wait, where's Eric?" The words cut through the night like a knife. We turned, breathless, scanning the dark field around us. The road leading back to the city stretched ahead, empty. The morgue loomed behind us, silent and dead, just as it had been when we arrived. But Eric was gone. "He was right behind us," Mark said, voice breaking. "He was right here." "Maybe he ran the other way?" someone suggested. Maybe he already made it to the car." We turned on our flashlights, swung our cameras around. Nothing but dead grass, twisted trees, and the distant glow of the abandoned building. There was no movement, no sound, just the faint hum of the wind against the broken windows. Then my camera blinked, its battery suddenly dying, and in the last frozen frame before it shut off, Eric was there. Eric. But something was wrong. He wasn't running. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't even looking for us. He was walking slowly, carefully, back inside into the morgue. We left, but one of us never made it out. He's still there. It was as though some force was pulling him back inside. It's been a year since we lost Eric to whatever that was in that morgue. I and my friends decided it was time to quit breaking into forbidden houses, mansions, hospitals and morgues. But each time I close my eyes to sleep, I still hear his faint cry for help. Maybe one day I will visit that morgue again, this time to find and save Eric.